Hi guys, this is Nathan Wilson, and today we're going to be tackling a couple of car enthusiast topics. The first topic we're going to cover is why Europeans seem to not like our cars over here in America. Why they come out from driving them so underwhelmed and just not all that excited about that. And we're going to talk about that, and we're also going to talk about the other end of the spectrum as to why some Americans don't like some of the European offerings. To kind of qualify myself to talk about the subject, I'm really just a car guy. I really just like cars. I love cars. I like driving. I'm a car enthusiast. That's what I like to do. That's what I dedicate my time, money, and talent to do. As far as we have in the stable right now, just kind of show you that I've had both sides. We have a 78 Trans Am with over 550 horsepower sitting in the garage. It has a Muncie 4-speed that's been built and a couple chassis enhancements. Very, very fast car. We have a 95 Corvette convertible. It's a C4 with the LT1 engine in it. That engine produced 300 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque from the factory, and it has a 4-speed automatic, which is qualifiably terrible, to be honest about it. We have a 2001 Camaro to round up the American side as far as cars are concerned. It has a 3.8 liter V6 in it. It has pretty much full bolt-ons. I haven't got a chance to put the tune on it yet, but it does have all the other bolt-ons. It's probably pushing somewhere around 230, 240 horsepower, maybe if I'm lucky. And it also has a 4-speed automatic, which is terrible. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But moving on to the German side of things, we've had two E34 BMWs, which are the E34 was the, I believe, the second generation. And I could be wrong, second generation 5 Series. We had the 525i, which put out somewhere in the 184 horsepower range, and we'll get to that in a second. And it also had a GM. It had a GM transmission. It had the same, not the same, but a similar 4-speed that was terrible. We also had a 540, which was 95. It had the 282 horsepower V8 and a 5-speed ZF transmission, which is a lot of the reason what makes these other transmissions so terrible. To the other Germans we have in the stable is a 2003 525i, which is an excellent condition, gorgeous car. It has blue metallic paint and white interior, and it's just gorgeous. That car has a 2.5 liter inline 6, I believe, somewhere in the 190 horsepower range, and another 5-speed auto from the ZF range of transmissions. And rounding up our German side of the field is our 2008 550i with the sports package on it. It has a 360 horsepower V8 and a 360 pound-feet of torque, and that's tied to a 6-speed ZF automatic transmission, which is the second best transmission I've ever operated in a car, only second to only the 8-speed ZF box that you find in the modern Audis, BMWs, and not Mercedes yet. They seem to have issues adopting that one. But anyway, let's go ahead and tackle the subject here. Why do the Europeans seem to have issues with our American cars? I mean, they're perfectly fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. And to your point, there is nothing wrong with them until you start driving the more European cars. And what you'll start to find is the contrast is that the typical equivalent European car is going to be more sophisticated, it's going to be more refined. It may or may not have more power, and we're talking about generally, okay? We can always find an exception. We can always find a little exception, but we're talking about the rule. I mean, there's always going to be rules and exception. Rule being that what happens most of the time, the exception being what happens not most of the time, probably less often. Now, I'm not, and like I said, I have no bias towards any particular brand or any particular country of origin that the cars come from. But I mean, American cars have really been pretty terrible over the past years, and now more recently they've gotten a lot better, and we'll get to that too. But as a general rule, you'll find that the European cars are going to be more sophisticated, okay? And the reason why they're going to be more sophisticated is because in Europe they're having the gas and oil just isn't as plentiful as it is over here. So what you're going to see is you're going to see downsized engines, and you're going to see we're going to see more camshafts. You're going to see more engineering go into these cars, particularly because they have to. These engines that, I mean, for example, the 360 horsepower engine that's in my our 550, it displaces 4.8 liters. It doesn't even displace 300 cubic inches. It's a small displacement motor because gas over there is astronomical. You look in Britain, they're paying anywhere from the equivalent of $10+ per gallon of fuel, and that's insane. So that's why you see the Lamborghinis, with 6 liter, 6.5 liter V12s, and then you see a Corvette with a 7 liter V8. That's why you see stuff like that, because over there they just don't have the availability of crude oil and stuff like that we have over here. So it's forced them a lot earlier than it's forced us to engineer cars with a lot more emphasis on efficiency. And when I say efficiency, I'm not necessarily talking about 40 miles per gallon. I'm talking about making use of your engine. If you want to use an example, it's really obscured example, but if we just want to use engine size, we want to use the size of your engine as an example. Okay, we can do a couple examples, but more likely, if you want to use a 4.8 liter that's in my 550i, GM has a 4.8 liter V8 that they used in their trucks that they just recently discontinued for the 2014 year. But you want to get I think you get 2008, 2009, GMC or Chevrolet with a 4.8 liter V8, and it doesn't even make 300 horsepower. Mine makes 360, and it also makes a decent torque, and it makes it from down low. It makes it all the way from from the instant you touch the throttle to the 6,500 RPM rev limiter, it's making that torque, and it makes it's very strong motor, and I promise you, if you go drive the GM motor, you're going to be very underwhelmed. And now that's a size comparison. Now, if you want to say, okay, well, what about the bigger motors? Maybe we can do something right in the bigger motors. Well, more or less. You want to talk about a 6 liter, let's talk about a 6.2 liter even. GM offers an LS3 6.2 liter, even a new LT1 6.2 liter that, is the LT1's developing to 460 horsepower, 465 with an exhaust option, if you will. And then the LS3 is producing anywhere from 426 horsepower. And you want to talk about that? Well, you can look at the Mercedes-Benz 6.2 liter that has anywhere from a state of tune to 480 horsepower, like in the C63, all the way up to the SLS Black Series, which is making stupid power up to the 620 horsepower range. So these engines that coming from Europe, as you can see, are making a lot more use of the cubic inches that they have, just simply because they were forced to make more use of it because of the efficiency that is required for you to operate a vehicle in the European continent, because gas is astronomical. We complain about gas over here, and even I hear people complain in Houston about gas. And let me tell you something. I just went to go fill up my car with 93 octane fuel, and that was $330 a gallon. Yeah, we won't go there. But the second thing you'll notice about is refinement, and it's a really tough word to define, but you can really describe it as just. Do you feel like you're driving? And is a fatigue that you're feeling while you're driving, is it high-level fatigue, low-level fatigue? How does it feel? Are you worn out when you get somewhere? Would you take a road trip in this car? There's a bunch of different questions that you can ask that will come up with the refinement. But I would give you the two extreme sides of the coin here. We talk about the 550 we have. You can get on the freeway in that thing. You can cruise at 90 miles an hour. You will not feel like, number one, you won't feel like you're going 90 miles an hour. Number two, the cabin is so isolated from what's going on out from around it. You barely hear the air coming in. The sound system's amazing. You got a Logic 7 surround sound going on in there. You can crank up the radio and the way that the car responds to this situation on the freeway is insane. You're isolated from sound. The seat is insanely comfortable, so you feel absolutely no fatigue driving 100 plus miles. You don't care. The only thing you notice is that the gas needles move from a full to half a tank now, because you just realize you've been doing 100 miles an hour the whole time and didn't even look down at your speedometer. So that's kind of how I can define refinement as an everyday type of thing. The interior quality is also another thing. You look around and everything just fits together. Everything just looks like it flows. Everything's nice. Obviously the outdated iDrive in this car, is a little slower than the newer ones, but dang, it has an onboard computer. You can check your oil from inside the car. It does all this other stuff that, if you were compared to, something that was made in America, just doesn't have. These things don't have it. The transmission's smart. It knows exactly what you're going to do. It has different modes in the transmission, which kind of goes back to the sophistication, but the level of refinement that these types of cars offer, even my 2003. The 2003 is an excellent example because it has over 100,000 miles on it. It's a sedan, and this isn't, in the configuration in particular, the 2.5 liter, it isn't putting out a whole lot of power, but I promise you, you will not, when you come away from driving it, you won't think that it had 200, less than 200 horsepower. You'll feel it's more than than adequate. First of all, it's more than adequate. Second of all, the way that thing pulls on the top end is insane. I cannot describe how stupid that this car feels. And when you look at the numbers, it just doesn't apply. But the same thing going down the freeway, has Michelin tires, Pilot Sports on it. Going down the freeway is insane. The level of refinement. This is a 2003. If I go back to my 95 540, same thing. The way that it mass speed, the way that it goes down the road, and the way that it handles is bar none. When it comes to the American side of the market, and that was in 95. Now, I've given you two good reasons why the Europeans struggle with our cars, and the other thing is that they're expensive over there. Like, just same way their cars are expensive here, our cars are expensive over there. And when you see the fact that their cars are, as a general rule, better built, better engineered, why would you can kind of understand why they kind of struggle with why they would be paying more for a car like that. Now, that's not to say the Americans don't do things well, and now we'll try to flip the coin to the other side, why some Americans don't like European cars. And that's not to say that the Americans don't do things well, because the fact of the matter is that they've stepped up their game exponentially in the past couple of years. The way Ford has been going about things, the way GM is getting better. I don't really like Dodge, but I kind of just admitted some of my bias, but even Dodge, the way that some of their interiors have come out, and then the new 300s, even the Rams, is crazy. You start talking about the things that the Americans do well. For the longest time, the Americans have built Mustangs, Camaros, and pickup trucks, and very well, and that's it. I mean, anything else was either a terrible, terrible thing to drive, or it would fall apart and have absolutely no reliability. And that's just been the way it's been for a long time. Now, more recently, you could get stuff like, a GTO, which was actually an Aussie platform. My F-body, I think, is an excellent example, because the Tremec T56 that's available in it, when hooked to the LS1, which is a very, very reliable motor connected to that chassis, I think is a very good buy. But once again, you start comparing it to the European offerings, kind of the same things, and they kind of fall short. But let's talk about why some Americans don't like the European stuff. I had a 95 540, and I needed parts all the time, because I was working on it, I was fixing it, I was doing stuff to it. Stuff like water pump, nothing crazy. Stuff like water pump and stuff like that cost a lot more than the typical American cars. And what you'll find most of the time is people that don't like the European cars. There's a couple of reasons why. They've either had a bad experience with them, which is you can expect that. You can have a bad experience. I have a terrible experience with my Camaro that I have right now. Or they've never driven one, which a lot of the times is the case. Or three, they don't find the extra refinement, the extra engineering that goes into it worth the extra cost, which really boils down to the who's buying it and who's paying for it. So really, at the end of the day, you have those three things that are going for them, and you can't really argue with them either way, because they're all personal experiences, and you don't want to offend somebody's personal experience or whatever, or anything like that. But I can honestly tell you, a lot of times your money goes farther in the American market, especially today. If you go back and look at, the CTS-V, back when the E60 M5 was still king of the streets, had that 500 horse V10. The CTS-V came out with 556 horsepower. It came out with a decent interior, and it came out with a really good chassis. So when somebody says, oh, why would I pay more for a car that's less powerful? It comes from, Germany, it doesn't make any sense. And a lot of times it's not always that obvious that, the European car has had more time spent on it. It's really not. And that's understandable. Most people don't look into it that deeply. They'll drive both. They say, I like this one better. It's faster. I like that one. I can get this one with this, and that. The SMG's jerky. I don't like that. And I'm buying the CTS. And that's perfectly acceptable. You're spending your own money. You can buy what you like. But that's not to say that those engineering differences aren't there. I'd like to point out the fact that the M5, the E60 particularly, which entered production in 2010, had the S85 B50 V10 in it, which is one of the best motors I've ever driven in a car, period, end of story. The LSA is a decent motor, yes, but, rev that V10 out to 8,500 RPMs one time and just tell me that was not the best experience, and you're just going to keep flipping that SMG paddle, and it's going to kick you in your butt every time you do it, and you just don't care. But let's think about this for a second. The CTS-V makes 10% more power, right? It's got 556 horsepower to the BMW's 507 horsepower. And let's not talk about the torque. The torque is insane different. Like the BMW is putting out 385 pound-feet, and the Cadillac is just whooping its butt in the torque department. But at the same time, I want to take you to examine this analysis and put the sort of analysis to this that you'd like. The CTS-V outperformed the M5, especially in Motor Trend's testing and a lot of other testing, from 0 to 60 and all the way through the quarter mile. It's outperforming the M5, which is what to be expected. You got a car that weighs a little bit less. You got a car with 10% more power and a whole hell of a lot more torque. Why does it not outperform? And it does. A lot of things it does. Some magazines were able to test better handling from the CTS, and others were not. Others would say the M5 had more or whatever. So that's kind of a wash to me. And you really got to drive them and kind of find your preference. But let's kind of look at what happens after the quarter mile acceleration wise. What happens after the quarter mile is the BMW is rapidly catching the CTS. It is. And you have to ask yourself, why is this car that's slightly heavier with 10% less power? 50 horsepower is a big difference. And you who are enthusiasts know that. Why is this car catching this car, after a quarter mile? Why is this happening? Why is it getting reeled in so violently after that? And you can see that even if you don't believe me, you can even look at the top speeds. With the manual transmission, automatic transmission, the CTSs have different top speeds. But even with the highest top speed you can get in a CTS, you're looking at about 190, high 80s and low 190s, which by all means is fast. Don't get me wrong, it's fast. That is insane for a sedan. But when you look at the M5, when an M5 that's not governed to the 155 mile an hour speed limit, a degoverned M5 is a 202, 205 mile an hour car all day long, and you have to ask yourself why. What is going on? There's a lot of things that go into it, obviously, and I'm just gonna kind of throw my hypothesis out there. That V10 displaces 5 liters, so it's a half a liter displacement per cylinder. That V10 also has 2 valves for the intakes and 2 valves for the exhaust. Okay, so when the intake stroke comes, there's 2 valves feeding it, and there's 2 valves letting the exhaust gases go. We talk about the LSA. That is a overhead valve, old school, old design engine with the supercharger. Now let's think about this as well. This LSA has 1200 cc's more displacement than the M5, and if that wasn't enough, it's added another 1.9 liters of displacement on top of the 1200 cc's of displacement, and that 1.9 liters of displacement is going to be a supercharger. So this M5 is really not having a good day on the spec sheet here. It's down 1200 cc before you even account for the supercharger. So it's really not in a good spot. But that overhead valve, let's get to that. That overhead valve placement, the LS is a great engine, and you will hardly ever hear me say anything negative about it. But that overhead valve architecture is very old school, if you will. Now, that bigger cylinder, now keep in mind, not only does it have more displacement, but it has 2 less cylinders. So these cylinders are a lot bigger in this V8 than it was in the V10. So these cylinders are being fed, these cylinders are breathing through a smaller valve, and they're exhaling through a smaller overall valve than the V10, because the V10, keep in mind, it has 2 valves, and those 2 valves make up for more surface area than the 1 valve does for the LSA. So this V10 is getting more air shoved in, and it's able to extract more air when the piston comes back up for that exhaust stroke than the V8 is. Now, and let's think about this for a second. Now, you don't start to see this until the top end, which actually kind of makes sense, because on the top end, that motor is really putting that horsepower to the test. It's really putting that to the test. Is it able to maintain this horsepower, this torque, in the higher RPMs? Is it able to keep accelerating this car? Because the faster you go, the more air the engine's going to need. And that's really my hypothesis. The M5, the S85 B50 V10, is a much deeper breather than the LSA, and that's to be expected, because the M5 costs more. The M5 costs a lot more. There's a lot more. That engine was developed for that car. That engine is not in any other BMW product than that car. Now you can argue it's in the M3, with the 4 liters and 2 cylinders chopped up, but that's another engine for that car. That 5-liter V10 is in one car and one car only. That LSA, you can find roots of in the LS architecture for billions of cars. I mean, billions of cars on the road today. That's not to say it's bad or anything like that, but that's just to show you the level of engineering that goes into a German car that simply, for whatever reason, just doesn't go into an American car. It could be budget, it could be anything else. And like I said, I'm very, very unbiased when it comes to this. I'm just presenting with facts here. And, American cars still represent an excellent value, and they still represent an excellent car, depending on which one we're talking about. But at the other side of it, the Germans offer excellent offerings too. And a lot of times, you'll see that the BMWs, the Mercedes, the Audis, they are leading their classes in refinement. They're leading their classes in engineering. They're leading their classes in all these other things. And like I said, this is not a knock on American cars. I love American cars. I love my 78 Trans Am. I love our Corvette. I love our F-150, and I love our Tahoe. But at the end of the day, I just have to admit that the level of sophistication, the level of engineering, and the level of comfort in these German cars have been bar none for a long time. And it has changed over time. The bar is getting a lot closer, a lot more even as time goes on. But as of right now, the pattern overall over the years, the Germans have killed us. They really have. And that's really why they don't like our cars. And hopefully you have some insight now as to why they trash talk our cars and stuff. Now, I like to see an American butt whooping every once in a while and put the smack down on some German and Japanese rivals. So I like that every once in a while. So this has been a great topic to discuss, and this is on my YouTube channel. So if you guys have any questions or think I should add something, or think I should maybe I was a little unfair about something, leave it in the comments. Otherwise, take care, guys.